Hi everybody, Gary Gormley from Fabsolutions. I hope you're well. Last week I had the opportunity to interview business continuity management specialist Warren Pickstone from a company called Bluwasp. Warren specializes in business continuity management, and in this video he talks about how to manage your business continuity plan, what risks to plan for, how to invoke it successfully, how to minimize the impact on your company's brand and reputation, and how to plan your way out of it in terms of business readiness. This is about a 45-minute video. You can check out the full-length video on YouTube, and thank you very much for listening.
I've spent a career in the fire service, and for quite a large majority of that, I was dealing with incidents, and towards the latter end, it was around business continuity. And for the fire service, that meant that we had to make sure that the fire engines, the call taking, the call handling had to happen no matter what. So there's lots of support that goes behind that. But if you can imagine, if, for example, the fire engines didn't turn a wheel, if the calls could not be taken, if the control operators could not actually take the message and send it to the fire stations, then people would die. So that meant that business continuity had to be right up there. I heard a talk a while ago, and they're talking about most businesses are not parachute salesmen, or they're not parachute manufacturers. Well, the fire service is one of those, and so is the police and the ambulance, etc. And there's many more businesses and organisations that probably have a similar sort of role, really. And it's important then that business continuity has got to be right at the forefront. So for that, we've looked at lots of plans, and we've indicated in my past so many different scenarios, and they come to fruition. So we've planned for them, we've got teams in place, and they ran well. Yeah, things will change, things will be adapted, but having that sort of business continuity mindset is a little bit like health and safety. I feel that once it's in the organisation, it becomes a cultural thing, then no matter the crisis, no matter the disruption, you all pull together and you've got a plan that you can work through. Yeah, you might have to change it, you might have to adapt to it, but you're not sitting down straight away and going, where do we start? You're not panicking. You've been there before. It might be a different scenario, but you go through it. And then I left the fire service, and for the last few years, I've been taking my knowledge and moving it into the private sector. And what I found there is some organisations are really good. They've taken it on board, but many are the wing it. We'll just wing it. It'll never happen to us. And I've spoken to businesses about, whether it be telecommunications out going down, other disruptions, supply chain logistics issues, and pandemics, and there are many were going, it'll never happen, we'll just wing it, what I mean? And it's those organisations, unfortunately, who are the ones who have probably been the worst hit, and many of those will not survive this outage, unfortunately.
You were giving advice to the industry that I work in, contact centres, so you touched on telecommunications there as one. If you were giving advice to industries, for example, about what a good BCP plan should include, what would be some of the things that you think actually these will be my top tips?
Yeah, I suppose really, if we take it forward, because there is sometimes confusion in terms of what business continuity is, and it's changed its name a few times the last few years. So some people talk about crisis management, business continuity. For the last 18 months, there's sort of been a change towards the words organisational resilience. So it's about making sure that your organisation is more resilient and is able to withstand disruptions more easier and come out the other side. But it all does come under business continuity management. And like anything that's of use, there's normally a process that you go through. So rather than jump into what we need is, people think we need a business continuity plan. Let's get a plan written and that's it, that will save us. Well, business continuity, for me, it's a little bit like New Year's resolutions, is that everyone knows they should do them and carry on with them. But come the 2nd, 3rd of January, you're drinking again, you're eating too much, etc., etc. Same with business continuity. Some of it sounds really simple, a bit like health and safety. Guards. Yeah, you do need guards and machinery, else you might cut your hands off. Yeah, obvious. But people, for years and years went, we don't need health and safety. The same with business continuity, really. It's about making sure that your organization can keep on that path no matter, you know, what the wind blows for you, really. And there is a process that sits behind that. One of the things really that people sort of jump to is they don't carry out business impact analysis. And for what you mentioned before, it's about contact centers. It's about looking what your processes are, what are your key things you need to do to be able to make them run. So if it was a manufacturing organization, you would look at your supplies that are coming in. You would look at what you actually need to process, your raw materials. And it normally comes to three things. So that would be staff, machinery, and materials. For a service organization, you've still got processes that mean that you can still sell your products, whatever they are, whether it be telesales, whether it be providing support. Within business continuity, it's about looking at your key things, because organizations got a multitude of things, but there are only certain ones that impact on the bottom line during a crisis, the things that you really need to focus on. Now, in an ideal world, you'd go through everything from taking, I'm trying to think, from cleaning the organisation to whatever. That should come under it. But really, you're looking at your key things. So in a call centre, it may be, it's really important that you need 24/7 call handling services and your VoIP needs to be up there. Well, if that's the case and you can't withstand the disruption for an hour, then you might need to look at having a secondary VoIP system, for example. Now that's jumping straight into solution mode, but you need to look at your key things. So rather than going to the end or trying to download a plan off the internet, you need to be specific for your organization. Yeah, there are templates out there that can help you, but you will know yourself in your organization. There's some key things on there. I know it's terminology, but it means you can all speak the same language. So you start talking about maximum tolerable periods of disruption. Well, this basically, up until recently, meant how long your organization can survive without it not being recoverable. Now, organizations, many of them, have been protected this time due to government measures. But if this was your organization and you had a denial of service to your business, it's a call handling service, and you just couldn't get into the business because something happened outside, the road collapsed or whatever, you just couldn't get into the business. Well, the government won't be there then to sort of bail you out. You'd have to try and rely on your insurances if you've got them. Do they cover you for that, etc., etc.? So that's why it's important for organisations to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. In order to do that, then you need to do a risk assessment. So if you had staff all over the country handling calls, it's a different risk than those in a central location in London, in a potential terrorist spot, for example. It's a different risk appetite that you've got. What you would do then is you would then look at your supply chain. So no matter what business you are, you've got to have some sort of supplies, whether that's your electricity, whether it's your telecommunications, whether it's your stationery, etc. You look at your supply chain, and what this thing has shown us at the moment is, and I've been saying this to my customers for quite a while, is that don't rely on a single source. Make sure you look at your supply chain. What's happened over the last 10 years or so, things have migrated to certain parts of the world. And the issue there is, you think you've got a supplier who's down the road, and actually the stuff that comes in may be coming from China, etc., etc. So it's about actually asking them to make sure, are they going to be secure in an incident? What are their plans like? And actually, they might be cheaper than somewhere else, but actually, if they've not got a clue what you're talking about, then go somewhere else. And if possible, spread that risk across multiple supply chains. And it is about building resilience into your organization. And ultimately, it will impact on the bottom line, but for the benefit. If your organization is still functioning when your competitors are down, they're more likely to come to you in the future. You're potentially going to get their business. In this instance at the moment, because of where we are, customers have got quite a lot more latitude, I'd say, in terms of, sort of giving organizations the benefit of the doubt. But if it was going back to you're the only supplier of telesales and you go down, then they're going to look somewhere else because that other organization is still functioning.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's lots of things. It depends on, and it's got to come from senior management. Senior management in a large organisation are the guys and girls who need to sort of drive this as well. They need to be signed up to it. In the smaller organisations, yeah, it's the directors. But a large organisation and a corporate, it's got to come from that approach. Because at the end of the day, once you carry out your risk assessment, there's potentially going to be things that you might need to purchase. So you might need to purchase additional servers. You might need to have purchased additional laptops in case there's a pandemic and your staff couldn't get into work. Now, some organisations didn't bother, left it too late. There was a shortage of laptops, but then the IT people haven't got time to re-image those laptops, or the staff are not very well, they're not in work to put on the VPNs, etc. So it's about thinking, who are your key staff? Who needs to be able to come into work? Who needs to have access, and making sure that you identify them beforehand. One of the things I think that people forget is around communications, and communications is a key thing during any disruption and crisis. I've been to some organisations who didn't have a simple contacts list or how to get it. It was there in a book, you know, in the office.
It's in the Rolodex.
Yeah, honestly, and you wouldn't believe, we think that every organisation, you know, is up to speed. I mean, we've been using Zoom for quite a while now, but some organisations now, they're going, oh, we've got a communication tool here. It's called Zoom. We've got Skype, etc. But the staff weren't aware how to do it. They didn't know how to log on, etc. So just a little bit of forethought before they sent everyone home might have helped them with some of these sort of teething issues. And it's the same thing with your business. You've got to look at your processes, look at your key people, and make sure they've got the resources and knowledge to be able to do it in case of a disruption. I know we're talking about the flu at the moment. It's not the flu, it's COVID-19. But the pandemic's been on the radar for ages. I mean, I'll just show you something on here. Give me a sec.
Or the kind of common things that people should plan for as part of it. So I'd be interested to get your views on that with kind of some of the stuff that we talk about here.
Well, first of all, let's talk about it in a sort of a national level, really. Just move myself out of the way. So this is a copy of a national risk register, and they do them every few years. And if you look on the sort of top right there, you'll see impact, and the bottom one's likelihood. You can't see it very well there, but there's likelihood as well. So for years now, the government have had a pandemic on their risk register. There's other things on there, if you look at it, such as attacks on crowded places, and we've seen that in Mumbai in the past and other places, and that seems to be in London, etc. That seems to be growing as well. You've got severe weather, electronic attacks, so that's cyber attacks, etc. Inland flooding, coastal flooding. So these things here are what the government is saying nationally we need to be aware of and be prepared for. So these are just some, and it's dependent on what your organisation does, where it is, whether it's across multiple sites, the number of employees, etc. So yeah, you could have physical damage to a building. That could be an explosion. It could just be high wind, etc. You might have damage or breakdown to your systems and equipment, access to parts of the building. And that one is an interesting one. I did some work for a building supply organisation. I don't like to give out names because it's not fair on the organisations because of confidentiality. But they'd moved all their equipment and all their supplies into one location. But before I went to meet them, I looked on Google to find out where it was. It was right in the middle of a floodplain. They had one road in and out of the actual site, and there was all high risk other organisations that are along that road. So they might have been absolutely fine in terms of their fire safety, their precautions, their risk assessment. But anything happens to those other organisations, they weren't going to get a truck in or out, or employees in or out of that site. So it's about looking at yourself and looking at what you can do. The big one at the moment is obviously around supply chain. Back in January, when it first started, end of January, it started to rear its head. I was already telling my contacts, you know, to try and double up on their equipment, etc. And it wasn't long before it started to impact on automotive plants, etc., because they weren't getting the plants across from China. But it could be at a local level as well. This is something that's key to you and your organisation. Make sure you've got potential backup. If you can, try to split it across 2 suppliers. But I do think at the end of this disruption, a proper review of your supply chain is a must for any organisation. And one of the key things behind all this, no matter the size of your business, is also capturing now the lessons learned. So capturing what went wrong and what went right, and what you've also done about it. Because organisations, from my experience, tend to have a limited time when they remember stuff. So once this all goes away, you shouldn't forget it. You should make sure you capture that learning, because there's a temptation to go, right, back on the tools, let's get going, and missing that learning. So when something happens again, you can't remember what you did last time. But also key is feeding it back into your plans. So if you thought, for example, that you had this business continuity plan to do X, Y, and Z, but actually you didn't put into it that you didn't think your staff would not be able to come to work because there was a lockdown, then it needs to be added to that, for example.
The challenge that I imagine a lot of organizations have is how much do they plan? To what degree do they have to think about all the different eventualities? So if you've got any tips you can share today, there's a risk that people overthink. How do you kind of keep it focused?
It's about, really, to try and answer your question more succinctly, is you look at what your key threats are and you focus on them. So you're not really all that bothered about the small items. They can come later on. But the main things are what's going to impact on your bottom line, what's going to impact on your reputation, what's going to impact on your staff safety, and you try and focus on those. I've developed basically templates you can use to take an organisation through that process, and it then enables you to get away from that. Well, my part of my organisation is the most important. Well, yeah, actually, it may be at certain times of the year, but if you don't get the finances sorted, if you don't get payroll sorted, then we've got no business, for example. And it's just really getting all the directors and all of the people together to sort of realise why they have to come to, it might sound like sucking eggs, but they have to come together. And it may be that this time that a certain section isn't as important as another section, but it's getting that on the board, it's getting them to agree to it. And by putting it in the process of a template, they can see it and they agree to it and sign up to it. That then will allocate this.
And I think there's some really challenging decisions that need to be made at that point, because I've spoken to organizations where they've forsaken running new business and generating new sales in order to protect their existing customers and to protect the claims and the processes of customers through that customer journey. So actually having some real key decision makers in that unit, I think, is really important for any business, because decisions need to be made quickly.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think key in any disruption is agility. And that's the main reason, or one of the reasons, for having a plan, because by planning beforehand means you don't have to waste that energy and expertise trying to work out what's next. You've got some key things that people know they should be dealing with to enable you to then, as a management team or director or a board, C-suite, to be able to focus on those new issues. We've seen it recently where organizations have made massive mistakes, and that's impacted on their sales of the future because of the reaction from the public to their decisions. Now, were they just firing off the hoof or whatever? We're not aware of public opinion. So communications within this is key. And part of the business continuity management is also looking at communication plans and how you're going to communicate, who's going to communicate, what you're going to be communicating. So that's the key thing, because we've seen it many years ago with Gerald Ratner saying that his stuff was crap and the company went down. The same thing can happen now, whether you're a sports shop, for example, naming no name, or whether you're a brewery or a pub place. It makes a big difference what you're saying. And just very briefly talking about communications, sometimes it's not your fault. So, Corona, the poor brewery there, what's happened to their sales? But it's how you recover and how you take that forward. So rebranding, renaming, etc. That may be one way around it. Mm-hmm. So they had Corona, then there was a company called COVID.
And, there's actually a company called COVID. That's
and I know the poor director was at a conference, and then he wondered why he kept on getting all these pings on his phone, and his conference couldn't really answer them. And it was because actually they make like HDMI cables, etc. But unfortunately, it's the same name. And people being people were Googling in, they were phoning up the landline, the office number, etc. And they were causing major disruptions. So sometimes it's out of your hand, unfortunately, but it's how you respond to it.
One question I've got, Warren, is how can businesses really test the resilience of their business continuity plan?
Well, one of the key things about business continuity is it's not just a one-off thing, it's a whole process, a bit like health and safety. So testing's key. Now, live testing is what we're doing at the moment, to be honest with you. This,
not really a test.
Exactly. So you're actually running it. So organizations should test their plans. So when the dust settles, then there'll be other things. This is a plan now around a disruption, around a virus, around a pandemic, but it's not tested other aspects of their business continuity plan, because they're still potentially able to access the building, although it might be key staff, accessing IT systems, etc. They're still able to do it. They've not lost all the data potentially, all the things that could happen. So it's testing a plan. It's around, reduction in staff, potential impacts on supply chain. But when this stuff settles, you need to do a regular process of testing your plans. So if you've got a communication plan, then you need to do some kind of desktop testing of that, trying it, seeing how it will work. If you've got plans where you should shut down the servers to be taken over somewhere else, then test them. The last thing you want to do if you've got, say, a generator is wait until we have a power cut and then find out you've actually expanded your business too much and it can't cope. You've not topped it up, you've not maintained it, it doesn't work. The fact that all the servers come back on at the same time means it can't take that initial surge and it blows. So you need to do sometimes it's live testing, it's exercising, and it's debriefing as well, because you've got to capture what went well, what didn't go as well, and what we've learned by that. So what can we do different in the future?
Smaller businesses who don't have that same structure, what services are available? What kind of approach is probably best for them to kind of make sure that they've got this nailed down, do you think?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what their business is. So, for example, if they're a single director, they've got a business and it is supplying websites, for example. Well, what they need to do is look at their key products and services and say what are the risks to them. So for them, if it's IT, yeah, you can go out. They haven't currently got another means of getting on the internet, then they can go out and get a MiFi dongle, etc. Or some people might have been investing in a second line. They might have a cable line, they might have a BT line, etc. But they need to look and say, well, what could happen to me? So what happens if they got a virus on the system? What happens if they were cyber attacked? Have they got backups? You have to go through what are the potential risks to that organization or that business, and then bat them off one by one. I know I've spoken to you in the past about a photographer who I was chatting to him during a network meeting, just going through what he did. He talked about this camera that was a few £1,000s and etc. etc. I said, well, what's that little black thing there? So that's my flash. So I said, all right. I said, how much are they? £11. All right. Have you got another one? Well, no. So following on, the next time I saw him, he had in his hands, he said, I'd arranged to do portraits for 25 members of this particular group. And when I got there, my flash didn't work. So I took all these pictures knowing that it wasn't working correctly. I got home and I tried to enhance the lighting. It just didn't work. Now for his business, that impacted on him because all these individuals had got ready, they'd had a shave, they'd wear their best kit, etc. They'd taken time out to actually go through this process, only for him not to be able to deliver for the sake of £11 piece of kit. So if you use that analogy, take that into your business, whatever it is. You might need to invest. You might need to invest in another drill if you're putting up blinds and you've only got one drill. Whatever it is, it might mean spending some money, but you know what your key products and what your service is.
So Warren, if I was to ask you, as a summary, what would your top tips be for people when they're approaching business continuity management? What would be the top few things that you'd say any organization needs to adhere to?
Right. Believe it or not, people don't know this as well sometimes. You think they would. Know what your key products and services are. So the ones that really matter to your organization, the ones that bring in the revenue. So that's tip number one, really. Do carry out a business impact analysis. There are templates online. You can always contact me if you need to, and I can help you with that. Do look at what's happened now. Use the time you've got now to think, okay, when this starts to lift, before then, am I ready? Am I fully prepared? So when the restrictions are lifted, you're able to carry on and hit the ground running. You don't want to be turning up when the restrictions are lifted and then trying to catch up. If you can use the time now for businesses to prepare for that process, if you stopped, some organizations are still running quite well, but for those other ones, have a think about that. How are we going to reopen? What's it going to be like? What's it going to look like, etc., and plan for it now. Yeah. And I think the thing around this as well, if you've got plans already, business continuity plans, make sure you capture what's happened, make sure you review them. I think that's the key things for me.
And you touched on one last one there, which I think is what everybody is hoping for. And it's actually thinking about when we open up, what's the potential BCM impacts of reopening? So actually thinking through how many calls we're going to get, how much product demand are we going to get, what if you're in claims, what type of claims are you going to get through? So actually starting to plan for, I mean, a lot of people have done the planning to close and the BCM of closing and the impacts of that, but actually there's equally as much risks when you reopen and everything goes guns blazing as well. So would you have any tips for the business readiness approach for that, just to close?
It depends on the type of business, doesn't it? The issues around furlough and when that stops. So it's key. You mentioned before about the finance, but there'd be other things maybe around cleaning and cleaners, making sure that your premises, if you've got premises, are ready. Your communications, think now about your communications, what that's going to look like. But also the human factor. Bear in mind, I know we're talking about small businesses as well as, large, but think about the impacts of the staff as well. That they potentially been off for quite a while, to some need refresher training. And actually, there's potentially going to be some HR issues. There will be some HR issues potentially coming out of this. So I know that one of the other speakers will be talking about HR. And I think that's one of the areas that people need to think about now, whether it's welfare, whether it's discipline. But also, I think that some businesses can use this as an opportunity to change how they perform, their ways of working. Definitely. So it may be that there's more home working, etc. But within that, they need to consider the health and safety issues of home working and making sure the staff have got the support to be able to function correctly. So that's just a review of your business again. You might want to do things differently. People might downsize and downscale on their office space they've got. Who knows going forward? But I can see on the positives for those businesses who have survived and will survive. It's around being able to do things more streamlined, more efficient use of ICT going forward, but also making sure that you definitely put that into your plans and definitely make sure that you review it again once the dust settles.
Brilliant. Warren, that has been absolutely invaluable. Thank you very much for sharing some of those slides as well. Really, really useful. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you to do a review of their BCM, how might they get in touch?
Okay, they can get me on LinkedIn, but my email address is contact@bluwasp.co.uk, and it's like Radisson Blue. I've not got any in it. Brilliant.
Awesome. Warren, that's been really, really useful. I appreciate you taking the time out for that. And best of luck with everything and stay safe.
You too. Take care, Gary.
Take care.